There's an interesting thing that I do, which I've done for about 20 years now. If I have any question about anything in life, past, present, future, anything, any deep question that I have, naturally I try and do some research or talk to people that I think are experts and things like that, like everyone else does. But I've found a better way to ask a question about anything and get an answer that's true for me in that moment. That's absolutely true for me in this moment. It just cuts through all the everything to get at truth. And I call this, for lack of a better word, talking to God. I mean, that's how I started it, but I asked the question to God, and then I would get an answer. And the answer was profoundly true and important. And I had spent maybe a lifetime with this question, not getting an answer. But in a moment that I asked this question of God, I get it right away. So it turns out to be the best way for me to ask a question about literally anything. Usually they're very deep questions when I come to that point. And I did this recently. I had a very deep question that I needed to have an answer to and tried all the research and everything and was not getting anything that was really complete. So the process of doing this, I've been doing it for years, but didn't really understand how or why. And what happens is essentially it's no different than what I do in the silent transmissions or samadhi. I just empty myself out, just completely empty, no self, no body, no mind, no world, no nothing. And that's what I call listening. Because if I'm empty, like a hollow bamboo, if there's nothing in here to get in the way, there's just complete silence and stillness. In that state, I'm able to listen. If there's a single thought in there, I can't listen. I'm just listening to my thought. Or if something distracts me, a sound or whatever, I'm just listening to that. So I have to be completely still with no distractions at all, which means no thought, no sense of a separate self. None of that, just an empty reed, an empty bamboo. And in that case, I'm silent enough so that I can listen. And when I listen, I always get an answer. So when I first began doing this years ago, I told someone about it and they said, "Oh, that's you. You're listening to you." And I interpreted what they were saying is that I was listening to my ego. And I said, "No, that's not good. I don't want to be listening to my ego that's giving me all this stuff, even though it was so perfect." If that's what it is, then I might have some doubts about the validity of it. So the next question I asked was, of course, that. How do I know this is not my ego? How do I know this is not my ego or my mind talking to me? And I asked that question, and then I emptied out and was in stillness and silence, listening, as I call listening, just being absolutely still and silent with nothing here so that I was able to hear the answer. And the answer at first was that I was filled with this experience of absolute bliss in every molecule of my body, just pure light and bliss in every molecule of my body, just radiant, completely transforming light and bliss. And then an inner voice said, "How do you like that?" And of course, I said, "Wow. What can I say? I mean, this is extraordinary. This is unbelievable. This experience is so profound and powerful and wonderful." And then it said, "That's how you know. That's how you know. That's how you know what's coming from truth because your ego can't do that. Your mind can't do that. Your mind can't give you this experience." And that's absolutely true because if it could, it would. right? What a convincing way of saying, like, this is true. I believe this. This is a true thought. And accompanied by this radiant bliss and light, it would be very convincing, right? But it can't do that. Fortunately, it can't. So the only thing that can is this truth. And when they said that's you, that was actually correct. But it's not the true, the me of Peter, this individual self, this particular body mind in this particular lifetime. It's not that at all. That is the one that has the questions. That is the one that doesn't know, that's seeking, that's searching. The answer comes from the true nature of what I am, which is not an individual person, not a separate self, just as you're not. It is the totality, God, if you will, as a word, the infinite totality, the source of all that exists. That's the true nature of all of us. That is what everything is. Everyone is. We all are the same thing, if we can call it a thing. So that's what answers. That's where the answers are. And it answering in that way brings my attention more and more back to that because it always gives me a successful answer. And nothing in the world ever has. So I still search and seek answers and go and do research and do all these other things. I still do that. But part of that is just to show me that I can't find it there. So over and over and over again, I don't. And as soon as I turn to this, I do instantly. It's always here. It took a while before I could reach this and hear from this. At first, I was just getting images, which I didn't understand. So eventually, I learned to do automatic writing, which is just you write whatever's on your mind, garbage, 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 until your mind is empty, until at least that's what happened with me. And then the answers start coming, and this experience that accompanies the answers come. So now most of my state of experience is this same bliss and light and peace and all. So I'm used to it. So it's not so powerful as it was in the beginning, but it's still here. It's my inner GPS system or Geiger counter for truth. When I have this experience, I know it's true. When this experience is not here, it's very obvious that it's not. It's not that a bad feeling comes, it's just that the lack of this bliss is telling me that whatever I'm experiencing, thinking, or saying is not true. And to correct that, to admit that, if truth comes, then it will come with this sense of bliss. And it always does. And that's how I know that it's true. And the more bliss there is, the more truth there is. The deeper the truth is, the more important it is to say it at that moment, which is how I teach, which is how the silent transmissions happen, or how I write, or how I paint. Everything comes from this, with this experience. Otherwise, it's not true and it's not worth doing. That's my experience. So this is talking to God. And when the the question that I had was, I've been living in Sedona and called to be in Sedona for the past a little over 10 years. And it's been wonderful. Again, it was this calling and this intuition that brought me here. With my mind, couldn't possibly understand why, but when I got here, I knew. I had been living in the Northeast and having these awakening experiences and certain CDs. People were healed around me, other things like that. Very confusing for me, but eventually I accepted it. But it wasn't anything that I could really share with the people I knew, including my Buddhist Sangha, including my Zen Sangha. I couldn't really, excuse me for a sec. I couldn't really express that to them, the healing or the past life experiences or those kinds of things. It was just a bit too much for them to accept, and other CDs and abilities that were arising with the awakening. So it wasn't something, I just knew that it wasn't something that I could really share with them. They wouldn't understand it. When I came to Sedona, people did. Most of the people here that I met had been living in India and ashrams for many, many years. They'd spent their whole life seeking and being with different teachers. So this was not unusual to them, the experiences that I was having. So I could share from my heart my own deepest experiences and be accepted, and that would be accepted here, not confused or, you know, thinking that was strange. And that was wonderful. So this community was beautiful when I was here. It was just a wonderful, welcoming community. Not that I wasn't welcomed in the Sangha, I was. People generally like me. And so I was welcome wherever I am. But I couldn't really share from this very deep place these experiences that were happening to me, but I could here. And so that community was wonderful. And then when COVID began, a lot of things happened that changed my experience of the community. One, COVID, so people weren't going out and we weren't having dances of universal peace or kirtan or different teaching, and people weren't coming to the Zendo for teaching. So that part of the community stopped. And it was not a problem for me, at first. I mean, I've spent over a year in silence without talking to another person, just living in this space of bliss, which is wonderful. So having it be kind of enforced and with COVID, that wasn't an issue for me. But after 3 years of it, it began to be an issue. I felt lonely. Everyone that I connected with was only on the computer here, like on Zoom and in individual sessions. And there were a lot of them, but still it was not, there was something missing, that it was only on the computer. So I was missing that face to face hugs and things like that. All of us have experienced this, I'm sure, the sort of loneliness that kind of comes in. And on top of that, many people in the community here began to fall into this trap of QAnon and Trump and things like that, which really surprised me, shocked me, and very much disappointed me. And that happened too. So I felt less connected with the community than I did before. About half the people went into that. And that was difficult for me. That was challenging. And then the Airbnb thing came, and my whole neighborhood was decimated. Most of the people left in my neighborhood, and many of the other neighborhoods in Sedona. They were where they were renting, they were kicked out. Even people that had lived here for 30 years were kicked out, and they were turned into short-term rentals. So that decimated the neighborhood. There's 75% of my neighborhood now is Airbnbs. So I missed, the neighborhood, the kids playing in the street, neighbors walking in the street, and our connection. And that made me feel like, well, I guess I should move to a place where there is a community, where a community is safe, where that can be. So I found the Ithaca Eco Village, and I felt very pulled to that. And that the inner guidance also helped me with that, and it said, yeah, that place right now is a community. And I went there, and sure enough, it is a community. And I saw people, on the walking in these paths. Everybody was very friendly. Everybody, embraced me. It was lovely being in this community again, being very much in a community, sharing meals, work groups, and all that. It was lovely. So it made me feel, well, I should move there then. I should move there. And so I asked again last night, the same process of what I call talking to God. And I asked, and then I emptied out, and I listened. And what I got was, it's always a surprise what you get from truth, from your true nature. It's always a surprise that comes. You never expect it. If you expected it, your mind would already do it and already know, but it doesn't. So coming from this silence, the first thing it said, when I said, should I move or stay here? the first thing it said is, you are here now, right? You're here now. Here now. And that's more than just being in Sedona, more than being in Ithaca. It's here now, being present. So it began like that. And then I asked, should I move from here? Should I stay in Sedona or move to Ithaca? And the answer was, as long as you're here now, it doesn't matter whether you're in Sedona or in Ithaca. In other words, as long as you're present in this stillness, in this silence, in this truth, in your true nature, it doesn't matter where you are. And if you go, I said, what about the loneliness that I feel of not being part of a community and a neighborhood and all that that's been lost here in Sedona? What about that? And it said, if you go to Ithaca, you will have a neighborhood, you will have a community, you will be involved with people, you will have that thing that you want. But who wants that? Who is lonely? Peter is lonely. This person is lonely. This person will find that community in Ithaca. But is that what you really are? So then the question is, are you saying, so to open up into this space, opening up into this space, is there any loneliness when you open to that space? No, no, just bliss, just absolute peace, just absolute freedom, absolute unbounded, limitless, infinity, eternity. That's all. So that's the answer. If you go to Ithaca, you will have community, you will have people that you're working with and engaging with all often, much more than now. But might that not distract you from this stillness and peace and bliss and infinite? And I realized, yes, it probably will. Which is why even here in Sedona, I'm very involved in community, but most of the time I spend in silence. Most of the time I spend in silence. Once or twice a month, I go out and join a group in Dances of Universal Peace or Kirtan, but most of the rest of the time I'm in silence. I hike in the rocks by myself in silence. I'm in this space, this open, empty bamboo, this empty reed that allows me to experience this and write and teach and do all the other things that come from this. So if I'm in the eco village, I'm going to be much more engaged with people, much more, maybe every day in some way, interacting with people. And that can distract me from this. And it probably will. And so even deeper, it said, everything, the community in Sedona that I was so confident of and dependent on changed, as everything does in this world. So when I go to the Ithaca Eco Village, at first things will be lovely and there'll be the community and all this, but that's also going to change. Inevitably, I will be disappointed because that is what the world gives you. Distraction and disappointment over and over again. And so from the inner stillness, it said, have you not learned that yet? If not, then you should go to the eco village and enjoy that and then be disappointed again. But if you already know that you'll be disappointed, you don't really need to do that. You've already experienced that enough in your life. The hope of something happening followed by the disappointment, and the hope of something happening followed by the disappointment, the searching for something that's perfect and finding that inevitably it's not, and this constant stream of hoping and being disappointed over and over again. Have you not learned that yet? Have you not seen this yet? And I have. I have. And it was very clear to me that the same thing would happen in Ithaca, as has happened throughout my life and your life and everyone's life. As my friend Steve said today, the world itself is a distraction. It's a distraction from this stillness, the silence, peace, and bliss. When we put our attention on the world, we're distracted from this stillness, peace, bliss, truth that is always here, that is always present. And that's what these silent transmissions are about. They're about this silence and stillness, the peace and bliss that is always present. Most of us are distracted most of the time because our attention is on the world, on the body, on the self. What is my preference? What do I want? That's all a distraction. The world itself is a distraction and inevitably a disappointment. We can have wonderful health in this body, but inevitably we will encounter ill health and eventually death. So no matter what we accomplish, we'll always be disappointed. This is something that's constant and inevitable in our life, in the world. And this is not a bad thing. This is a lesson. It's showing us that when our attention is on the world, we don't see truth. We don't find peace. We don't find bliss. We don't find truth. We don't find God. We don't find our true self because it cannot be found in the world. Ever. Not with a teacher, not with anything. It's always present, always in us, always everywhere around us. The true beauty of the world is that it is God. It is truth. Not as we see it, not as it appears to us, not as we think it is, but beyond all thought. It is stillness itself. It is silence itself. It is the eternal itself. It is the infinite itself. Everything. A blade of grass, a mountain, our body, everything. Everything is this same thing. But we can only see that when we experience it ourselves, when we empty ourselves out of the world, of all our thoughts and beliefs and everything else. When that's completely empty, then we can listen. Then we can listen. And when we listen, we realize we are this. We are this totality. There is only this totality. There has never been anything but this totality. It just appears different. Our conditioned minds see things as separate with name and form. That's not the way it is. That's a distraction from truth. But in order to experience truth, we cannot experience truth while we have a single thought, because that's a distraction. We have to be completely empty to experience truth. And that way we can hear. And that way we can see. So what I got in this message from God is that the most important thing is this. Also, I was told that most people, most humans do not experience this. They are not empty enough. They're filled with the world and thoughts and themselves and all that. that's a distraction from this, so they don't experience this. Because I do, it's a blessing for the world, because when I'm an empty bamboo, an empty reed, a vehicle for this, to be filled with this, then that enters into the world, which is what the silent transmissions are. It is this entering into the world. Other people experience it. It doesn't have to just be here, but all the time. When I walk into a grocery store, it happens. It's always happening when I'm present in this way. It's a blessing to the world and everyone that's around me. And even more than that, people who don't know anything about it are experienced by it. So this is a very important thing to do. But again, I'm not told, so you should do it. It's like, no, you can do it. You can do it. There's no should or not do it. You can go to Ithaca and go through all that and have great enjoyment, and then suffering again, and then disappointment, and then other, conflicts. And you could never do this again. But why would you want to do that? There are not many people that are open in this way. And since you are, why not do it? Why not put your focus there? So the desire to go to the eco village, which was sort of looking for perfection, looking for a paradise, looking for salvation, looking for a happiness, looking for freedom from suffering in the world, right? Because the Ithaca Eco Village is also in the world. They're doing wonderful things, paying attention to climate change and the environment and helping that and helping people. They're doing wonderful things, yes. But ultimately, it's not truth. Nothing in the world is. And ultimately, you cannot find truth in the world, in anything, no matter how beautiful or noble it is, no matter how useful it is, no matter how beneficial it is. You still can't find truth there. And there will always be disappointment because of that. See, the disappointment is not a punishment. It's not something that is in the way. It's teaching us. It's showing us. It's a gift. The disappointment is a gift. The suffering is a gift. It's showing us that we cannot find truth, peace, and freedom from suffering in the world, whether it's in a spiritual teacher, a retreat, or a eco-village, or a marriage, or a job, or success, or anything in the world. What we're seeking has always been here. It is the one who's seeking it. It is the true nature of what we are, seeking perfection when we are perfection, seeking freedom from suffering when we are freedom from suffering, seeking bliss when we are bliss, seeking peace when we are peace. We're just looking in the wrong direction. And the entire world is the wrong direction. When we let go of all this, all our perceptions, everything that we see, everything that we conceive, everything we think, everything we believe, everything our senses tell us is here, when we let go of all of that, we become empty of illusion, empty of a dream, empty of Maya, empty of samsara, empty of illusion. And we're able to listen, which means to be this that we are. So this listening, when I talk to God, is the way that I've always thought about it, is being God. It's being our true nature. We have to let go of everything that's a dream in order to do that. And the practice of asking questions is wonderful because I'm highly motivated to get an answer. I'm in a quandary and a conundrum that cannot be solved, like a koan. And some of these earlier questions were things that I'd had all my life into adulthood, from a child all the way into adulthood. Why was I born into this family? Why was I bullied at such and such an age? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? These very questions that troubled me. And all of that was answered in truth, in perfection. And the question just came to an end when it was answered instantly, because it came from truth and it came from being. So when that person said, you were answering those questions, that's what he really meant. It wasn't time for me to accept that yet. I felt that if I accepted that, my ego would take over and say, I am the totality. I am God. I am this. And it would just inflate my ego, which was already bad enough. So I put off that realization until that wouldn't happen. So I didn't turn into a spiritual ego or something like many teachers have. That didn't happen for me because I waited. And it was just me and God for a while until that separation dissolved. That separation ended. That sense of me ended. That sense of I ended. But it's not that it doesn't come back. It can come back. It's still present. It's just that my attention is on the totality most of the time. For a while, it were oscillations of being, on the ego and then free and then on and free and back and forth and back and forth and on for many, many years. And then more and more, there was the space of being in this space and not going into the ego at all, except for very rarely and for a short time. And always that was accompanied by suffering, which is the great gift that we have, that we know that we're not in a state of freedom and peace and truth and bliss when we have suffering. When any suffering appears, we know we're back in illusion, back in a dream, back in a sense of self. So it's a wonderful thing, because without that, we wouldn't know. What would we rely on? Our mind? It's never really done a very good job so far. Why would it start doing? I mean, it becomes better and more humbled and more in alignment with awakening. It can accept that it knows nothing eventually. It can accept letting go is the way. And so it doesn't interfere anymore. It can be quiet and not distract. Attention doesn't go to the thoughts anymore. It doesn't matter what they're doing. They just remain so far in the background we're not aware of them, which is what happens when we're listening. All the body's still functioning. The brain is still thinking and doing whatever it does. It's just that we're not aware of it at that moment. Our attention is completely on this silence and stillness, this emptiness, so that we can listen. And then we're filled with this bliss, filled with truth. So that was my experience. Again, it's a wonderful thing to do, because it's one thing to be in samadhi, which is the same state. We're empty, but we don't have a question. So we're just living in this space of bliss and freedom and infinite and eternal. We're just in that freedom, that space, without a question. And that's all there is that, which is everything. And lovely. And that's what happens with the silent transmissions. I'm simply in that space, this space. But when we ask a question, it's different, because we'll ask the first question and then be in this space and have the answer. And then we may return to the person that asked the question, the sense of self, and ask another question. And then we drop back to listen. So we're able to learn to very quickly drop into this space because we come out of it, again, to ask the question, because there are no questions in this emptiness. It's infinite. There's no questions there. It is complete, 100% complete. And then we drop back into the one who needs a question asked and ask the question. And then we go back into that completeness again. And the answer comes from there. So it's a practice of that helps us very quickly just drop into this by going back and forth. So that's a good thing to do, you know. Staying in this place more and more often and deeper is also very good to do because we're bringing this into the world in a way for this body mind. That's the purpose of it. That's why it's here. There is no other purpose for this being here other than to be in this state, to be an empty vehicle, allowing this to fill and come through. That's it. And everything that I do is that. In artwork, it's become that. In writing and teaching, in the silent transmissions, in everything that I do, it's this. If I do something I've never done before, it's the same thing. It only really works well when I empty out and allow this to flow through. It may be hard to understand this, I know, and I'm grateful for the people who come to me who are my students. That's a strange word, students, but it doesn't make any sense. My friend Sarah Joy Nagel said, there are no teachers and students. They're just friends sharing truth, which is much better. I like that. So friends sharing truth. Yeah. So when friends sharing truth, I'm grateful for friends sharing truth because they're open to this, whether they understand it with their mind or not. There's still an openness to it. It touches something in them. It touches that same truth in them, and they allow that to happen, whether they're aware of it or not, whether their mind knows or not. It still touches them, and that's an acceptance of this and a learning and a growing from it. It's seeds that are planted that are growing inside until you can feel this yourself, until you can do this yourself. And you know when you can. There's no reason to be frustrated or trying and be frustrated by it. It's just an emptiness that happens by itself. The more you go towards it, the more you simply open to silent transmissions, the more it's already happening. And you feel less attached to the self. You may not notice it all at once, but as years go by, you'll say, oh my God, I'm much less attached than I was like a year ago. You know, something will show you that, and you'll see, oh, there's been a lot of progress. What is progress in spiritual growth? It's letting go of the sense of self, letting go of the dream, letting go of the illusion. It's not something we get, like some great insights and things. Those are fine. Those are helping us in the way, and they feel good. But it's really the letting go. It's not the insights. It's the letting go. It's not anything we get. It's letting go of illusion. Because everything that we really want has always been here. Everything that we really want is always here. So when I ask a question and open into this space, the answer comes because it's always been here. It's always been here. It just arises naturally because it's here. And only my sense of a self and the dream and the separation and all the thing we've all been conditioned with is in the way of seeing the answer that's always here. So how we get the answer is we clear that away. We let go of that. So there just is this stillness and silence. And even those words, it's not like that. It's not like anything that we think. It just means that there's nothing in the way anymore. It's silent of illusion, silent of thoughts. It's still of distractions. There are no longer distractions. There are no longer thoughts, which are distractions. There's no longer any distractions. It's not like we enter into a void. We just enter into something that's free of distractions. And what we experience is inconceptual. It cannot be conceived. It cannot be thought. And that's where the answers come from. The answers that are always present, that are always here. So as our true nature, we know the answer to every question already that's in us. So when I look for it in the world, in Google or in teachers or other things, that's only showing me a lesson to see it's not there. It's not where you think it is. It's already in you. It's not out in the world. Not in books, not in Jesus, not in Buddha, not in anything, anywhere. It's already here, already present in you. And when you really experience that presence in you, you can see that it's also in the world and in everything, but not in the way that we think. That silence is in music, that stillness is in motion. It's in everything. When we look at a flower, the beauty of it is that infinite, eternal essence of the source of it. It's in that flower. It's in everything that exists. But we don't experience that until we wake up to it in ourselves. We are that. And everything else is that. So I found that asking questions is good because some of us have these very, very deep questions that have been just not torturing us, but really strong questions that we want answered that have stayed in our whole life. Some of them come from trauma, very deep questions. Why did this traumatic thing happen? And we don't get any answer in the world, not anywhere, from doctors, from teachers, from books, from anything. But we can find that in us because it has always been here. We see the gift of the trauma. Everything in this world is teaching us. Everything in this world is leading us to truth, to awakening. So Ramana Maharshi, a big influence for me, said that the world is illusion. The world is Maya, illusion, a dream. Only Brahma is real, is true. Only God is true. The world is Brahma. The world is God, or God is the world. That's a powerful thing, right? The world is illusion as we see it. As we experience it, it's all illusion. It's all a distraction. Only this true source is real. Only this is true. Only this is true. Only this is true. God is the world. In other words, everything we see in the world, it's really God. It's not the world. A tree is not a tree, it's God. A blade of grass is not a blade of grass, it's God. That's what it really is. It's all God. This body is not this body, it's God. It's all God. There is nowhere that is not God and nothing that is not God. So that's something that we directly experience subjectively from this experience of stillness and silence. When we empty out, this is what truth tells us. And it's fine to keep learning. As it told me, it said, you can go to the Eco Village and enjoy community and have all that stuff there, yes, you will find all those things there. And then inevitably you'll be disappointed again, because that's the purpose of it. If you could find what you were really seeking in the world, there would be no reason to wake up. There would be no reason to really discover truth. You'd be happy with what you found. So I said, yeah, go and do it and be disappointed, and then you'll come back again, because it's just another thing. Or since you've done that so many times, you don't need to do it again, really. You can just stay here in truth. That's a great blessing, a great lesson. And of course, it's not anything that I expected or the answer that I was looking for, but it never is. It's never the answer we're looking for. Truth is never the answer we're looking for, because we're not looking for it from truth. We're looking for it from illusion. So the answers we want are all also illusion. And truth doesn't give us illusion. It just gives us truth. It's not that we're disappointed, because, as I said, there's this great experience of truth and bliss that accompanies it. So it's wonderful. I mean, we know it's true. And in the world, we never find truth like this. Everything we find in the world does not have this quality of truth in it. This quality of truth is a very palpable, felt experience. It is the experience of awakening. That's what truth is. It's the experience of awakening. So when we experience that, that's truth. That's truth. That's wonderful.